Sarah Mitchell stood at the bus stop on the edge of Pineville, Virginia, watching the late afternoon sun paint the Blue Ridge Mountains gold. Her duffel bag sat at her feet, worn and faded from 12 years of service. She wore jeans and a simple gray hoodie, trying to look like anyone else. But the way she held herself, the alertness in her eyes, marked her as different. The town looked smaller than she remembered. Main Street still had Mayer's hardware store and the Bluebird Diner. The old courthouse stood proud in the center of the square. Everything seemed frozen in time, like she'd never left at all. But Sarah had left, and she'd seen things most people in Pineville couldn't imagine. She'd joined the army at 18, desperate to escape a town that felt too small for her dreams. Her father had died when she was young, leaving her mother to raise 3 kids on a waitress salary. Sarah learned early that if she wanted something, she had to fight for it. The army became her family. She excelled in basic training, then pushed herself harder. When the opportunity came to try out for special operations training, her commanding officer laughed. "Mitchell, that's not for women," he'd said. But regulations had changed, and Sarah had the right to try. She made it through selection. Then came the real training, the kind that pushed her beyond what she thought possible. The Joint Special Operations Command didn't care about gender. They cared about results. Sarah delivered. For 8 years, she served in places she couldn't talk about, doing things she'd never be able to share. She'd earned respect from men who'd initially doubted her. She'd proven herself over and over. Then came the mission that ended her career, an ambush in the mountains. She'd saved 3 teammates but taken shrapnel in her leg and shoulder. The wounds healed, but the doctors said she couldn't meet the physical requirements anymore. At 30, Sarah found herself medically retired with a Purple Heart, a chest full of medals she couldn't display, and no idea what came next. Coming home seemed like the only option. A rusty pickup truck pulled up to the bus stop. Sarah's older brother, Tommy, leaned out the window. He'd aged more than 12 years should have allowed. His face carried new lines, and his eyes looked tired. "Hey there, stranger," he said with a weak smile. Sarah grabbed her bag and climbed in. The truck smelled like motor oil and pine trees. Tommy pulled back onto the road without saying much. They'd never been the talking type. "Mom's excited you're home," Tommy finally said. "She's been cooking all day." "How is she?" "Getting older, arthritis in her hands now, still works at the diner 4 days a week." Tommy glanced at her. "She won't admit she needs help." "Sounds like Mom." They drove past the old high school where Sarah had run track, past the park where she'd spent summer evenings. Everything looked the same but felt different, or maybe she was the one who'd changed. Tommy cleared his throat. "Listen, Sarah, things are different here now. There's been some trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "There's a new police chief. Guy named Brent Holloway. He came from somewhere up north about 3 years ago. Thinks he's running the whole town now." Sarah looked at her brother. "What's that got to do with us?" Tommy's jaw tightened. "He's got it out for our family. Started with stupid stuff, parking tickets and code violations. Then he went after the garage." Sarah knew Tommy ran their father's old auto repair shop. "What happened?" "He claimed I was running an illegal operation, storing hazardous materials wrong, all kinds of nonsense. Cost me $15,000 in fines and upgrades. I had to take a loan just to keep the doors open." Tommy's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. But that's not the worst of it. They turned onto Maple Street, where modest homes lined the road. Their mother's small house sat 3 from the corner, the paint peeling but the garden well-tended. "It's about Jenny," Tommy said quietly. Sarah's heart dropped. Jenny was Tommy's daughter, her niece. "Is she okay?" "She's 16 now, got into some trouble at a party 3 months ago. There was drinking and someone called the cops. Holloway arrested her himself. He was rough with her, Sarah, really rough. Bruised her wrist, scared her half to death." Anger flared in Sarah's chest. "Did you file a complaint?" "Of course I did. You know what happened?" "Nothing. Holloway's got friends on the town council. He wrote it up like Jenny resisted arrest. Now she's got a record and she's terrified. Won't leave the house most days." Tommy parked in front of their mother's house. Before Sarah could respond, the front door opened. Margaret Mitchell stood on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She was smaller than Sarah remembered, her hair completely gray now, but her smile was the same. Sarah climbed out of the truck and walked into her mother's arms. "My girl," Margaret whispered. "My brave girl is home." They held each other for a long moment. Sarah felt something inside her chest crack, just a little. She'd held herself together for so long, staying strong, pushing forward. But here in her mother's arms, she could feel the weight of everything she'd carried. Inside, the house smelled like pot roast and fresh bread. The living room was exactly as Sarah remembered, down to her father's favorite chair in the corner. Photos lined the mantel, including Sarah's official military portrait in dress uniform. Margaret fussed over dinner, asking questions about the bus ride and if Sarah was tired. But Sarah noticed what her mother didn't ask about: the war, the missions, the injuries. Margaret knew better than to push. She'd learned long ago that her daughter would talk when she was ready. Jenny came downstairs as they were setting the table. She'd grown into a beautiful young woman with her father's dark hair and her grandmother's gentle eyes. But Sarah saw the nervousness in how she moved, the way she kept her distance. "Hi, Aunt Sarah," Jenny said softly. "Hey, sweetheart, come here." Jenny approached slowly, and Sarah pulled her into a hug. The girl felt fragile, like she might break. During dinner, Sarah watched her family. She saw the strain in Tommy's face when he thought no one was looking. She noticed how Margaret's hands trembled slightly when she passed the potatoes. She observed how Jenny barely ate, pushing food around her plate. This wasn't the homecoming Sarah had imagined. She'd thought about peace and quiet, about healing and figuring out her next chapter. Instead, she'd walked into a family under siege. After dinner, Sarah sat on the back porch with Tommy while Jenny helped Margaret with dishes. "Tell me everything about Holloway," Sarah said. Tommy lit a cigarette, something he'd quit years ago. "He's 45, divorced, no kids. Came from Philadelphia with recommendations that looked good on paper. The town council hired him because the old chief retired, and they wanted someone with big city experience." "What's his problem?" "Power, control. He runs this town like it's his personal kingdom. He's got 3 officers under him who do whatever he says. If you're in his good graces, you're fine. If you're not," Tommy trailed off. "Why does he have it out for this family?" Tommy looked uncomfortable. "Remember Dale Holloway?" Sarah thought back. "Big guy, played football, 2 years ahead of me in school." "That's his nephew. You turned Dale down for prom, remember?" Sarah stared at her brother. "You're telling me this grown man is harassing our family because I wouldn't go to a dance with his nephew 20 years ago?" "It's more than that. Dale asked you out a few times after that. You embarrassed him in front of his friends once, told him to take a hint." Sarah remembered now. Dale had been persistent, almost aggressive. She'd finally snapped at him outside the grocery store, loud enough for his buddies to hear. She'd been 17 and didn't have patience for boys who couldn't take no for an answer. "That's insane," Sarah said. "Brent Holloway is insane. He's a bully with a badge. And now that you're home," Tommy looked at her with worry. "Sarah, you need to keep your head down. Don't give him any reason to come after you too." Sarah didn't respond. She watched the stars come out over the mountains, thinking about enemies she'd faced in the dark on the other side of the world, thinking about training that taught her to assess threats and neutralize them. Inside, she heard Jenny laugh at something Margaret said. It was a small sound, fragile, like the girl had almost forgotten how. Sarah had spent 12 years protecting people, protecting her country, protecting her teammates. She'd faced down terrorists and insurgents. She'd operated in the shadows, doing the hard things so others could sleep safely. Now her family needed protecting. And Brent Holloway had no idea what he'd invited into his town. "I'm going to stay with you and Jenny for a while," Sarah told Tommy. "If that's okay." Tommy nodded. "The spare room's yours for as long as you want it." "Good," Sarah stood up. "Tomorrow I want to hear everything, every detail about Holloway, every incident, everything." "Sarah, what are you thinking?" She looked at her brother. I'm thinking that I didn't survive 12 years in special operations to come home and watch a bully terrorize my family. This isn't some war zone. You can't just... I'm not going to do anything illegal, Sarah interrupted. But I'm also not going to hide. I'm done running from bullies, Tommy. I'm done letting bad people get away with hurting good ones. Tommy studied his sister. He saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there when she left at 18. Something hard and certain. Okay, he said quietly. But be careful. Holloway isn't like the guys you dealt with overseas. He's got the law on his side. Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then it's a good thing I learned to work within the rules. JSOC taught me a lot of things, Tommy, and one of them is how to take down an enemy without them even seeing it coming. Inside the house, Margaret called them in for pie. Sarah took one last look at the peaceful town spread out below, lights twinkling in windows where families felt safe. Tomorrow she'd start gathering intelligence. She'd learn everything about Brent Holloway, his patterns, his weaknesses. She'd been trained by the best operators in the world. She knew how to plan, how to execute, how to win. Brent Holloway had spent 3 years terrorizing a small town, hiding behind his badge. He thought he was untouchable. He was about to learn what happened when you threatened someone trained by the Joint Special Operations Command. Part 2, Reconnaissance. Sarah woke before dawn, habit carved deep from years of military routine. Tommy's spare room was small but comfortable, with Jenny's old drawings still taped to one wall from when she was younger. Sarah dressed in running clothes and laced up her shoes. The leg injury ached in the morning cold, but she'd learned to work through it. Pain was just information. She stepped outside into the gray pre-dawn light and started running. Pineville looked different in the early morning. Sarah ran through the quiet streets, mapping the town in her mind. She noted the police station on First Street, a brick building that also housed the town offices. She observed which houses had lights on, who was awake, the patterns of a small town coming to life. She ran past the high school, past the park, through the neighborhoods. Her leg protested, but she pushed through. The doctors said she'd never meet special operations standards again. They were right, but she could still move, still function. That was enough. When she returned to Tommy's house an hour later, the sun was rising and sweat soaked her shirt despite the November chill. Tommy was in the kitchen making coffee. "You're up early," he said. "Old habits." Sarah poured herself a cup. "Where does Holloway live?" Tommy gave her an address on the north side of town. "Sarah, what are you planning?" "Just getting familiar with things. Tell me about his officers." Over breakfast, Tommy laid it out. Holloway had 3 officers under him. Deputy Chief Frank Morris had been with the Pineville Police for 20 years. He was a good man, by Tommy's account, but he'd learned to keep his head down under Holloway's leadership. The other 2 were younger. Officer Ray Brennan was 28, ex-military himself. Tommy said Brennan seemed torn sometimes, like he didn't agree with everything Holloway did but was afraid to speak up. Officer Tyler Chase was 25, fresh out of the academy, and followed Holloway like a puppy. "What about the town council?" Sarah asked. 5 members. Mayor Patricia Henderson runs the meetings, but she's weak, doesn't want to rock the boat. Tommy counted on his fingers. Then there's Bill Crawford, owns the Ford dealership. Linda Park, she's a retired teacher. Mike Thompson runs the feed store, and Douglas Reeves, he's a lawyer. Which ones support Holloway? Crawford and Reeves for sure. They play golf together. Patricia tries to stay neutral. Linda and Mike have questioned some of his decisions, but they never push hard enough to change anything. Sarah filed away the information. Every operation needed intelligence. You had to understand the terrain, know the players, identify the weak points. After breakfast, Sarah drove Tommy's truck into town. She parked on Main Street and walked into the Bluebird diner where her mother worked. The diner hadn't changed in 20 years. Red vinyl booths lined the windows, and the counter had the same cracked spots Sarah remembered. The smell of coffee and bacon grease hung in the air. Margaret was refilling coffee for a table of older men. She smiled when she saw Sarah and pointed to an empty booth. Sarah slid in and ordered eggs and toast. While she waited, she listened. Small town diners were information hubs. People talked freely, assuming everyone already knew their business. She heard Mrs. Patterson complain about a parking ticket she'd received for being 2 minutes over the meter limit. She heard Mr. Jenkins mention that his son had been pulled over 3 times in 1 month for minor infractions. She heard whispers about the police chief, how he was changing the town, how things weren't like they used to be. Officer Ray Brennan walked in halfway through Sarah's breakfast. He was tall and lean with military posture. Sarah watched him order coffee to go. He nodded politely to the other customers, and Sarah noticed he seemed well-liked. When Brennan turned to leave, Sarah caught his eye. Something flickered in his expression, recognition maybe. He'd been military too. He could spot one of his own. He paused at her booth. "You're new in town." "Not exactly, just been gone a while." Sarah extended her hand. "Sarah Mitchell, Tommy's sister." Recognition dawned in his eyes. "The one who was in the army." "That's right." Brennan studied her for a moment. "Welcome home." He said it with weight, like he understood what coming home meant. After he left, Margaret slid into the booth across from Sarah. "That was friendly." "Just saying hello." Margaret lowered her voice. "Ray's a good young man, served in Afghanistan, came back and joined the police force about 2 years ago. I think he struggles working for Holloway." "Why doesn't he quit?" "Jobs aren't easy to come by around here, honey. And he's got a wife and a baby on the way. Sometimes people do what they have to do." Sarah understood that. She'd made her own compromises over the years, following orders she didn't always agree with because that's what the mission required. But there came a point where you had to draw a line. After lunch, Sarah walked to the public library. Mrs. Chen, who'd been the librarian since before Sarah was born, helped her set up with a computer. Sarah spent 3 hours researching. She found Brent Holloway's employment history. He'd been a detective in Philadelphia for 15 years before coming to Pineville. His record showed several commendations, but also 3 internal affairs investigations. All 3 had been dismissed due to lack of evidence. Sarah dug deeper. She found news articles about excessive force complaints, found a pattern of behavior that suggested Holloway had been pushed to take early retirement and landed in Pineville as a way to salvage his career. She researched the town council members, looking for connections and pressure points. She studied local ordinances and police regulations. She reviewed Virginia state law regarding police conduct and citizen rights. Knowledge was ammunition. Sarah was loading her weapon. That evening, Sarah drove to the address Tommy had given her for Holloway's house. She didn't stop, just drove past slowly. It was a rental on the edge of town, nothing special. A black SUV with tinted windows sat in the driveway. Sarah noted the security cameras, the lack of nearby neighbors, the wooded area behind the property. She drove past twice more over the next hour, varying her timing. She was cataloging patterns, looking for routines. On her way back to Tommy's, a police cruiser pulled in behind her. Lights flashed. Sarah pulled over calmly. She put both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen and waited. The officer who approached was young, probably Chase. He walked up to the window with exaggerated swagger. "License and registration," he said without preamble. Sarah handed them over. She'd been pulled over before and knew how to handle it. Stay calm, be polite, don't give them ammunition. Chase studied her license with his flashlight, even though it wasn't dark yet. "You're Tommy Mitchell's sister." "That's right." "What are you doing, driving around this neighborhood?" "Just getting reacquainted with town. I've been gone a while." "You were speeding." Sarah knew she hadn't been. She'd been watching her speedometer carefully. "What speed did you clock me at, officer?" Chase's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being questioned. 42 and a 35. "I had my cruise control set at 34. "Are you calling me a liar?" Sarah kept her voice level. "I'm just telling you what my speedometer said, but if you say I was speeding, I'll accept the ticket." Chase seemed disappointed that she wasn't arguing. He wanted a reason to escalate. Sarah had seen the type before, young guys with something to prove, pumped up on authority. He went back to his cruiser. Sarah waited, hands still visible on the wheel. She breathed slowly, staying calm. Getting angry wouldn't help anything. Chase returned with a ticket. 42 and a 35. That's a $150 fine. Drive more carefully, Miss Mitchell. Sarah took the ticket without comment. Chase waited, clearly hoping she'd argue. When she didn't, he walked back to his cruiser with obvious frustration. Sarah pulled away slowly, carefully staying under the speed limit. In her rearview mirror, she saw Chase following her for several blocks before finally turning off. Message received. They were watching her now. That night, Sarah sat with Jenny in the living room while Tommy worked late at the garage. The girl was doing homework, or pretending to. Sarah noticed she'd barely written anything in 20 minutes. "Can I ask you about what happened?" Sarah said gently. "With Chief Holloway." Jenny's pencil stilled. For a moment, Sarah thought she wouldn't answer. "There was a party," Jenny finally said, her voice quiet. "At Lucas Grant's house. His parents were out of town. I shouldn't have gone. I knew there would be drinking." "You're 16. Teenagers make mistakes." "I didn't drink anything. I swear, Aunt Sarah, I was just there. But then someone called the cops and everyone scattered." Jenny's hands trembled slightly. "I was trying to leave, but Chief Holloway grabbed me. He twisted my arm behind my back really hard. I told him he was hurting me, but he just squeezed tighter." Sarah felt the anger rising but kept her voice calm. "What happened next?" "He threw me in his car. Not like put me in, but actually threw me. I hit my head on the doorframe. At the station, he was screaming at me, calling me trash, saying I was just like my father, that our whole family was garbage." Tears spilled down Jenny's cheeks. "He said if I told anyone he'd been rough, he'd make sure I got charged with resisting arrest. He said everyone would believe him over me because he's the chief and I'm just a dumb kid from a family of losers." Sarah moved to sit beside her niece, pulling her close. "He's wrong about all of it. You're not dumb and this family is not trash." "But he's right about one thing," Jenny whispered. "Everyone does believe him. Dad filed a complaint and they just ignored it. Nobody cares." "I care." Jenny looked up at her aunt. "What can you do? He's the police chief." Sarah thought about missions she'd run where the target seemed untouchable. Warlords protected by armies. Terrorists hiding in fortified compounds. There was always a way in, always a weakness. "Let me worry about that," Sarah said. "But I need you to do something for me." "What?" "I need you to be strong a little while longer. Can you do that?" Jenny nodded slowly. "Good girl." Sarah squeezed her shoulder. "And Jenny, start documenting everything. If Holloway or any of his officers interact with you, write down exactly what happened. Date, time, who was there, what was said. Can you do that?" "Why?" "Because the truth matters. And sometimes you have to collect evidence before anyone will listen." After Jenny went to bed, Sarah sat at Tommy's kitchen table with a notebook. She began writing down everything she'd learned. Every detail about Holloway, his officers, the town dynamics. She drew diagrams showing connections between people. She noted patterns and behaviors. This was how you planned an operation. You gathered intelligence. You identified objectives. You considered all possible approaches. You prepared for contingencies. Tommy came home near midnight, exhausted from working late. "Got pulled over today," Sarah mentioned. "Speeding ticket from Officer Chase." Tommy's face darkened. "You weren't speeding." "I know. That's how it starts. They're going to harass you now just like they did to me. Sarah, maybe you should." "I'm not leaving," Sarah interrupted firmly. "I'm exactly where I need to be." Tommy looked at his sister, at the notebook spread across his table, at the determination in her eyes. "What are you planning?" he asked. Sarah looked up at him. "I'm planning to fix this, but I need time and I need you to trust me." "I trust you, but Sarah, this isn't like what you did in the military. You can't just—" "I know, this requires a different kind of operation, one that works within the system, not outside it. JSOC taught me more than just how to fight, Tommy. They taught me strategy, patience, how to identify an enemy's weakness and exploit it methodically. Holloway won't go down easy." The hardest targets never do. Sarah closed her notebook. But everyone has a breaking point. Everyone makes mistakes. Holloway's been operating without consequences for 3 years. That makes him confident, overconfident. And overconfident enemies make the best targets because they stop being careful. Tommy sat down across from her. What do you need from me? Everything you've got. Every document related to your harassment. Every ticket, every fine, every interaction. I also need you to introduce me to other people in town who have had problems with Holloway. Can you do that? Yeah, there are a lot of them. Good, Sarah stood up. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start building the case. That night, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her leg ached from the day's activities. Her shoulder throbbed where the old shrapnel wound never quite healed right. Her body was telling her she'd pushed too hard. But her mind was clear, focused. She'd spent years hunting bad guys in the shadows of foreign countries. Now, she'd come home to find one in her own backyard, hiding behind a badge and terrorizing good people. Brent Holloway thought he was safe, thought he was untouchable, thought a small town would protect him better than any fortress. He was wrong. Sarah Mitchell had been trained by JSOC. She'd learned from the best operators in the world. She knew how to plan, how to adapt, how to execute. And now she had a mission. Outside, an owl hooted in the darkness. Sarah listened to the peaceful sounds of her hometown at night, thinking about all the families sleeping soundly, unaware of the predator in their midst. That was about to change. Part 3, Building the Case. Sarah spent the next week moving through Pineville like a ghost, observing everything but drawing little attention. She fell into a routine, running at dawn, spending hours at the library, having lunch at the diner where her mother worked. To anyone watching, she looked like a veteran trying to adjust to civilian life. But every movement had purpose. Every conversation gathered intelligence. Tommy connected her with Jack Morrison, who owned the gas station on Route 29. Jack had been fined $5,000 for supposed environmental violations that he swore he'd fixed months before the inspection. When he protested, Holloway had threatened to shut him down completely. Sarah met with Linda Park from the town council at the library. The retired teacher spoke in hushed tones about students and families she knew who'd had run-ins with Holloway's aggressive policing. He's changed this town, Linda said sadly. People are scared. They don't trust the police anymore. But every time I try to bring it up at council meetings, Reeves and Crawford shut me down. Sarah talked to Maria Santos, whose son had been arrested for a minor scuffle outside the high school. The charges were dropped eventually, but not before Holloway made sure everyone in town heard about it. Maria's family had lived in Pineville for 3 generations, but now she was considering moving. Each story added weight to the picture Sarah was building. Holloway wasn't just a bully. He was systematic. He targeted people who couldn't fight back, people without resources or connections. He used his badge as a weapon, and the town's governance structure protected him. On Thursday morning, Sarah was at the diner when Deputy Chief Frank Morris came in for breakfast. The older officer looked tired, carrying himself with the weariness of someone who'd lost faith in what he was doing. Margaret seated him at the counter near where Sarah sat. "Morning, Frank," Margaret said warmly. "Morning, Maggie." He noticed Sarah and nodded. "You must be the daughter who was in the service." "Sarah Mitchell," she offered her hand. Frank's grip was firm. "Frank Morris, thank you for your service." "You too." Sarah had learned that Morris had been a Marine decades ago. "How long have you been with Pineville PD?" 22 years. Started as a patrol officer under Chief Brennan, Ray's uncle. Those were good days. Regret colored his voice. Sarah stirred her coffee. "Things change." "That they do." Frank studied her for a moment. "Heard you got a ticket from Chase the other day." "That's right." "Were you actually speeding?" Sarah met his eyes. "What do you think?" Frank sighed. "I think you should be careful. Chief Holloway doesn't like the Mitchell family." "So I've heard. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" The bluntness caught Frank off guard. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "What can I do? He's my boss." You've been here 22 years. You know this town. You know what's right and what's wrong. Knowing and being able to do something about it are two different things. Frank's jaw tightened. I've got 3 years until retirement, Miss Mitchell. I've got a pension to think about. Sarah nodded slowly. I understand, but I wonder if you'll be able to live with yourself once you're retired, knowing you stayed silent. She left money on the counter and walked out. Behind her, she felt Frank's eyes following. She'd planted a seed. Whether it would grow remained to be seen. That afternoon, Sarah drove to the county seat 20 miles away. The county sheriff's office had jurisdiction over the entire area, including Pineville. If there were problems with local police, the sheriff's office should be the next level of oversight. Sheriff Tom Brady was a career lawman in his late 50s. His office was cluttered with commendations and photos from decades of service. He greeted Sarah politely, but warily. What can I do for you, Miss Mitchell? Sarah laid out the situation methodically. She presented documentation Tommy had collected about his harassment. She shared Jenny's story, showing photos of the bruises on her niece's wrist from the arrest. She explained the pattern of behavior targeting their family and others in town. Brady listened, his expression growing darker. When Sarah finished, he leaned back in his chair. I've heard rumors about Holloway, he admitted. But Pineville PD is independent. I don't have jurisdiction unless there's a clear violation of law. Assaulting a minor is a violation of law. According to Holloway's report, your niece resisted arrest. She's 16 years old and weighs 110 pounds. Officer Chase was also present. Are you telling me it took 2 grown men using that level of force to arrest a teenage girl who wasn't fighting back? Brady shifted uncomfortably. What do you want me to do? Investigate. That's your job, isn't it? My job is to maintain order across the entire county. If I go after every complaint about local police departments, I'd never get anything else done. Sarah leaned forward. Sheriff Brady, I spent 12 years in the Army, 8 of those years in special operations. I've seen what happens when bad actors are allowed to operate without accountability. It starts small, then it grows. Holloway has been terrorizing Pineville for 3 years. How much longer before someone gets seriously hurt or killed? Brady's expression hardened. Are you threatening violence? I'm predicting it. Bullies escalate. That's what they do. And Holloway's a bully with a badge, which makes him more dangerous than most. Sarah stood to leave. I came here hopping for help from the proper authorities. I see that's not going to happen. But understand something, Sheriff. I'm not going away. I'm going to stop Holloway one way or another. It would be easier with your help, but I'll do it without if I have to. Miss Mitchell, be very careful. What you're suggesting could be seen as interfering with law enforcement. Sarah smiled without warmth. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just a veteran trying to protect her family. Have a good day, Sheriff. She left the office knowing that visit had been a long shot. The county sheriff didn't want to get involved. That meant Sarah was on her own. But she'd expected that. That evening, Sarah met with Ray Brennan. She'd left him a note at the diner asking him to meet her at the park after his shift. He showed up in civilian clothes, looking nervous. They sat at a picnic table away from the playground, where a few kids were playing before dark. Why did you want to see me? Ray asked. Because you're the only one of Holloway's officers who seems to have a conscience. Ray's jaw tightened. That's a dangerous thing to say. Is it, or is it just the truth? Sarah studied him. You were infantry, right? Afghanistan. Tutor, Helmand Province. Then you know what it means to follow orders. But you also know there comes a point where illegal orders don't have to be followed. What Holloway does isn't illegal. It's just, Ray struggled for the word, immoral, unethical, wrong. All of that, Ray rubbed his face. But I've got a wife who's 7 months pregnant. I've got bills to pay. Jobs aren't easy to find. I know, my mother told me. Sarah paused. But I also know you didn't serve tour in Afghanistan just to come home and become part of the problem. Ray looked at her sharply. You don't know anything about me. I know you're conflicted. I know you hate what Holloway's doing. I can see it in your face every time you're around him. The question is, are you going to keep being complicit, or are you going to do something about it? Like what? Testify against my boss. That's career suicide. Maybe, or maybe it's the chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. Isn't that why we served? To protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Ray stood up. I shouldn't be talking to you. Holloway already warned me to stay away from your family. Why? Because he knows you're going to be a problem. He can sense it, and he's making plans to deal with you. Sarah stood as well. Then we're even because I'm making plans too. Ray started to walk away, then stopped. Without turning around, he spoke quietly. There's a camera in the interrogation room at the station. It's supposed to be recording all the time, but Holloway has someone turn it off when he wants privacy. If you could prove he's been turning it off during arrests, during questioning, that would be a policy violation at minimum, maybe enough to start a real investigation. How would I prove that? The camera system keeps logs, time stamps of when it's on and off. Those logs are on the server in the admin office. If someone knew how to access them. Ray finally turned to look at her. I didn't tell you any of this. Tell me what? Ray nodded once and walked away. Sarah stood in the park as darkness fell, thinking about what Ray had given her. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Access to those logs would show a pattern of Holloway disabling recording equipment. That would raise questions. Questions led to investigations. But she needed to get into the police station's computer system. That night, Sarah sat at Tommy's kitchen table with her laptop. She'd learned basic cyber operations during her time with JSOC. Nothing fancy, but enough to understand systems and vulnerabilities. Pineville PD probably had basic security at best. Small-town police departments rarely had the budget for sophisticated cyber protection. The question was how to gain access without breaking any laws herself. She couldn't hack the system. That would be illegal and would undermine everything she was trying to accomplish. She needed legitimate access. She thought about the station layout from her observations. The admin office Ray mentioned would be where civilian employees worked. Pineville probably had a secretary or administrative assistant who handled paperwork, phone calls, general office work. Sarah opened Facebook and searched Pineville Police Department. Their page listed the staff. There was Betty Carlson, who'd been the department secretary for 15 years. Sarah found Betty's personal page. She was 58, liked posting photos of her grandchildren, shared recipes and motivational quotes. Her privacy settings were weak. Sarah could see most of her information. Betty had recently posted about her computer acting slow and freezing. Several friends had commented with sympathy. One suggested she take it to Mayer's computer repair in town. Sarah smiled. Everyone had vulnerabilities. The key was finding them. The next morning, Sarah walked into Mayer's computer repair. Old Mr. Mayer had retired years ago, and his son Jeff ran the place now. Jeff had been 2 years behind Sarah in school. Sarah Mitchell, Jeff greeted her warmly. Heard you were back in town. How long's it been? They caught up for a few minutes, then Sarah got to business. I need a job. Jeff blinked. Here. I need something to do while I figure out my next move. I'm good with computers. Learned a lot in the Army. I can do basic repairs, troubleshooting, that kind of thing, and I'll work cheap. Jeff scratched his head. Business has been slow lately. I don't know if I can afford to hire anyone. Pay me minimum wage. Part-time. I just need something to keep busy. Well, Jeff considered it. Actually, I am getting backed up. Lot of people bringing in machines lately. Tell you what, let's try it for a couple weeks, see how it goes. Sarah shook his hand. You won't regret it. By that afternoon, Sarah was wearing a Mayer's computer repair polo shirt and learning Jeff systems. She was pleasant, efficient, and seemed genuinely happy to be working again. On her third day, Betty Carlson brought in her computer from the police station. It's been so slow, Betty complained to Jeff, and it keeps freezing up. Chief Holloway's going to have my head if I can't get the reports done. Jeff was working on another computer. Sarah can take a look at it. She's great with this stuff. Sarah took Betty's computer to the back. I'll have it ready for you tomorrow morning, Miss Carlson. Oh, thank you, dear. You're Tommy Mitchell's sister, aren't you? Yes, ma'am. Betty lowered her voice. I was so sorry to hear about the trouble with Jenny. That shouldn't have happened. Sarah looked at the older woman. You work at the station. Have you seen things that concern you? Betty glanced around nervously. I shouldn't say anything. But you want to. Chief Holloway, he's not like Chief Brennan was. Things are different now. Harder, I don't like how he treats people. Betty clutched her purse. But I need this job. I'm a widow, and my pension isn't enough to live on. Sarah put a gentle hand on Betty's arm. I understand. Don't worry. Your computer will be ready tomorrow. After Betty left, Sarah took the computer to the workbench. She ran diagnostics, which showed minor issues with the hard drive and some malware. Easy fixes. But while she had the computer, she also looked at the network settings. Just as she'd suspected, Betty's computer was logged into the police station's network. Her credentials were saved for automatic login. Sarah didn't do anything with that information yet. She simply noted the network name, the security protocols, and Betty's access level. She fixed the computer properly, cleaned up the malware, defragmented the drive. The next morning, Betty picked up her computer, delighted with how fast it ran. You're a miracle worker, she said. Just doing my job, but Miss Carlson, you should probably change your password. For security. I could see it when I was fixing the network settings. Betty looked worried. Oh dear, I'm not very good with technology. Could you change it for me? Of course. What would you like it to be? Betty thought for a moment. How about Grandkids 2024, with a capital G and the number 2024? Sarah typed it in carefully. All set, nice and secure now. After Betty left, Sarah had what she needed. Network access, a legitimate password, and most importantly, a reason why she might have that information if anyone ever questioned it. She'd been hired to fix the computer, and Betty herself had asked her to change the password. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. That night, Sarah waited until late. She sat in Tommy's kitchen with her laptop, thinking about the line she was about to cross. What she was planning wasn't hacking, exactly. She had legitimate credentials given to her by the account holder. She was simply accessing a computer system she had password access to. The question was whether that access gave her rights to view the security camera logs. In a strictly legal sense, probably not, but it was a gray area. Sarah thought about Jenny's bruised wrist. She thought about Tommy struggling to keep his business open. She thought about all the families in Pineville living in fear of their own police department. Sometimes, you had to operate in the gray areas to accomplish the mission. She logged into the police station network using Betty's credentials. The system was poorly organized, with files scattered across multiple directories. Sarah navigated carefully, leaving minimal digital footprints. She found the security camera system folder. Inside were logs going back 3 years, since Holloway had taken over as chief. Sarah downloaded them all, saving copies to an encrypted drive. Then she logged out and cleared her browsing history. She spent the next 4 hours analyzing the logs. What she found made her angry, but not surprised. The interrogation room camera had been disabled 47 times in the past 3 years, sometimes for hours. The logs showed who'd accessed the system to turn it off. Brent Holloway, 42 times. Tyler Chase, 5 times. Sarah cross-referenced the times with arrest records, which were public information. In 31 of those instances, the camera had been turned off during questioning of suspects or witnesses. That was policy violation at minimum. At worst, it suggested Holloway was hiding something: physical intimidation, illegal questioning, maybe worse. But the logs alone wouldn't be enough. She needed more. She needed testimony from people who'd been questioned when the cameras were off. She needed to connect the dots between disabled cameras and incidents of abuse. She needed a case that couldn't be ignored. Sarah closed her laptop as the sun began to rise. She'd taken the first real step. Now she had to be smart about the next moves. Because Holloway was watching, and if he discovered what she was doing, he'd find a way to stop her. The game had truly begun. Part 4, The Trap. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah worked methodically. She continued her job at the computer repair shop, maintaining her cover as a veteran struggling to adjust to civilian life. But every spare moment went toward building her case against Holloway. She interviewed 12 people who'd been questioned at the police station. 8 of them reported that Holloway had been aggressive, intimidating, or physically rough during questioning. 5 specifically remembered being told the cameras were broken or off for maintenance. Sarah documented everything: dates, times, witnesses present, specific threats made. She built a timeline that matched perfectly with the camera logs showing when recording had been disabled. She also discovered something else. 3 times in the past year, evidence had gone missing from the station's evidence locker. Not big items, but small things: cash from arrests, personal items that should have been returned. The missing evidence was always logged during times when Holloway had been working alone at the station. The pattern was clear. Holloway was corrupt, violent, and had been operating with impunity because no one had the courage or resources to stop him. But Sarah had learned to be patient. She'd run operations that took months to set up properly. You didn't rush. You built your case carefully, closed all the exits, and then you struck when the target was most vulnerable. The opportunity came on a Friday night in early December. Sarah was having dinner with Tommy and Jenny when her phone rang. It was Jack Morrison from the gas station. "Sarah, you need to come quick. Holloway's here with Chase. They're threatening to shut me down. They've got some inspector with them claiming I've got more violations." "I'll be right there." Sarah grabbed her jacket. "Tommy, call Frank Morris at home. Tell him he needs to get to Jack's gas station right now. Tell him it's an emergency and I need him there." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done 2 weeks ago." Sarah drove to the gas station with her heart steady and her mind clear. This was it, the moment she'd been preparing for. When she arrived, Holloway's black SUV was parked out front with Chase's cruiser beside it. Through the window, she could see them inside with Jack and a man in a county inspector's uniform. Sarah walked in with her phone already recording video. It wasn't hidden, she held it openly. "What's going on here?" she asked. Holloway turned, his face darkening when he saw her. He was a big man, 6'2" and heavy through the shoulders. His face was red from years of drinking, his eyes cold. "This is police business, Miss Mitchell. You need to leave." "This is a public place, Chief Holloway. I have every right to be here." Sarah kept her voice calm and clear for the recording. "Mr. Morrison called me because he's being harassed. Again." "Harassed?" Holloway stepped toward her. "He's in violation of multiple safety codes. We're shutting him down." "Really? Because he passed inspection 3 weeks ago. I have the documentation." The county inspector looked uncomfortable. "There are new violations." "Violations that appeared in 2 weeks." Sarah kept the camera steady on Holloway. "That seems suspicious, almost like someone wanted to find violations regardless of whether they existed." Holloway's hand moved toward his hip, toward his weapon. Sarah didn't flinch. "You're interfering with an official investigation," Holloway said, his voice low and threatening. "I'm exercising my First Amendment rights to observe and record police activity in a public place. That's completely legal, as you know." Tyler Chase moved to block the door. "Chief, want me to arrest her?" "For what crime?" Sarah asked. "Chief Holloway, Officer Chase, I want to be very clear. I am not interfering with your investigation. I am standing here peacefully, observing and recording. If you arrest me for that, it will be a false arrest and a violation of my civil rights." Frank Morris walked through the door behind Chase. "What's going on here?" "Stay out of this, Frank," Holloway snapped. But Frank looked at Sarah, at Jack, at the whole situation. She saw something change in his expression, a decision being made. "Chief, maybe we should all take a step back," Frank said carefully. "I said stay out of this." "Sir, I can't do that. This situation is escalating, and I think we need to. You think. You're not paid to think, Morris. You're paid to follow orders. Frank's face flushed. With respect, sir, I'm also sworn to uphold the law, and what I'm seeing here doesn't feel right. Holloway turned on his deputy chief, fury radiating off him. You questioning me? I'm expressing concern about how this is being handled. For a moment, Sarah thought Holloway might actually swing at Frank. His whole body was tensed, his breathing heavy. This was a man on the edge of losing control. Good. Overconfident enemies made mistakes when they lost their temper. Everyone needs to calm down, Sarah said firmly. Chief Holloway, if Mr. Morrison is truly in violation of codes, then document them properly and go through the correct legal process. But intimidating him and threatening to shut him down immediately without proper procedure isn't legal. And I have it all on video. Holloway's eyes fixed on her phone. Give me that. No. I said give me that phone. It's evidence. Evidence of what? I haven't committed any crime. You have no legal right to my phone. Holloway lunged forward and grabbed for the phone. Sarah stepped back smoothly, her training taking over. She'd spent years learning hand-to-hand combat, learning how to defend without escalating to violence. She deflected his grab, creating distance. Chief Holloway, you just committed assault on camera. I strongly suggest you back off. Holloway's face was purple now. He reached for his weapon. Don't, Frank's voice was sharp. His own hand was on his gun now, not drawn but ready. Chief, that's enough.